Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast. Today we're talking with Chris McLaughlin. Chris is founder and executive director of the Animal Rescue Front, which was founded in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. She also is the author chronicling her experience of the book called Mississippi Barking, Hurricane Katrina, and a Life That Went to the Dogs.
You are the kind of person who wants to improve the lives of others, but you need to take pride in your everyday actions. You Are a Philanthropist believes that every act of goodwill deserves to be recognized as philanthropy. Each individual action you take impacts another's life. Believe that what you do makes a difference. So call yourself a philanthropist and start a ripple effect of generosity that boomerangs back to you. Go to youareaphilanthropist.com/shop. Style your outside to match your inside. Choose a t-shirt, hoodie, or bag to show how much you love giving to others. That's youareaphilanthropist.com/shop.
Hey y'all, I just want to remind you that I need you to subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast. If you're enjoying it and want more conversations like this and want to help people get more involved with philanthropy, please subscribe, rate, and review. I want to thank you to the people who have already rated this podcast 5 stars. Please click to rate it 5 stars. And here is some awesome reviews. I love hearing the different stories from a variety of people's personalities. We all can contribute with the strengths we have in making the world a better place for all of us to live in. Here's another one. I really enjoy this podcast. It's encouraging to see that I don't have to be a multimillionaire who created a philanthropic foundation to impact people. It's my small gifts of my time and resources that add up. I am a philanthropist. And here's another. There are opportunities all around at an early age to remind us to look out for each other. It's a lifelong journey of seeing the opportunities and acting in them. Thanks for a great reminder. Listeners, please do me a favor, subscribe, rate, and review right now so more people can hear more from us and learn more about philanthropy.
Welcome to the You Are a Philanthropist podcast with Jen Klein, a certified fundraising executive and philanthropic entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you to make a difference in your community and our world. Jen believes all acts of kindness matter, and this show is designed to help you take pride in your everyday actions of improving the lives of others and making a change in the world. Now, here's Jen.
Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jen. Glad to be here.
Chris, I'm so happy you're here. I recently had an experience of my own with fostering and rescuing a puppy from down in Oklahoma. And it was a wonderful experience. I'm so excited about what you're doing. And I was just wondering if you could share with our guests about what the Animal Rescue Front does.
So the Animal Rescue Front was founded unexpectedly, I should say, in 2005 in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, which not many people know, but the hurricane itself and the subsequent flooding of a major United States metropolitan city was the first disaster of that type in our country, of that magnitude.
Yeah.
And as a result of what happened on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and New Orleans, animals were particularly at risk. Many were abandoned, many were in shelters, many were strays on streets. Some were forcibly left behind by the officials, police, and such. And what happened was people like myself, just ordinary citizens, started to understand that this is what had happened. And while there was much attention being placed particularly on New Orleans, because it was a city, And a lot more people were affected in New Orleans than they were on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But as a result of the news stories that were coming out, many of us realized that the animals were being largely forgotten. Celebrities were writing big checks for people. There were multiple efforts to get people out of the flood zone. A lot of us know what happened at the Superdome, and the animals were basically left to fend for themselves. So through a series of events, I ended up going down to help the animals, and that was the beginning of the Animal Rescue Front, which was a name that came into focus also unexpectedly. And the acronym is ARF. So it ended up being really relevant, and it was, people get a kick out of our acronym. So that's how we started. And here we are, almost 18 years later, and the pet overpopulation, coupled with other issues that we still see down in the Deep South, are still being addressed by my organization. What we do now is very much what we did back then, which was we get animals out of bad situations and we bring them to good situations. And we do that with our transport program, among other things.
I'm so happy to hear about your involvement with the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and seeing this need of people not taking care of the animals. And I love that you just took the initiative to come down from the Northeast and make an impact and stay with it. And I'm just really excited about what you're doing, because animals are so innocent and give us so much joy, and taking care of them is so important.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, when I think about, and I hear this a lot from, I've met hundreds of people over the years that we've adopted to, or that have adopted our animals through the various shelters that we work with in the Northeast. And time and time again, I hear the most incredibly inspiring stories of how the people didn't save the animal saved the person. Yeah. And that is so, that is just, it's so gratifying to know that it's a complete circle of healing. And it's one of the reasons why I never stopped doing it. I really, the subtitle of the book, Hurricane Katrina and a Life That Went to the Dogs, is really true. I mean, my life really has gone to the dogs. I had no insight that when I first got in my vehicle and drove the 1,600 miles to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, that my life was going to be irrevocably changed forever. And the trajectory of my life was going to be a complete 180 from what it had been prior. So it was all really quite unexpected, and ultimately a wonderful gift.
Yeah. To be honest, when there's, a emergency in the world, I usually send money, and I just love how you just got down there as soon as you could and started to make an impact.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm curious if you could share what you were doing previously, prior to getting in your car and going down there. Were you employed in the for-profit world? What were you doing at the time?
So in 2005, I had been unemployed at that point for about almost 5 years, believe it or not. I had a very successful information technology career. And when 9/11 happened, I a lot of people in the middle class of America not only lost their jobs, but the middle class really kind of imploded, and the technology field really imploded. I was out of work. I mean, I did some work. I started some consulting endeavors on my own in information technology, helping small businesses on Cape Cod get, their networks up and running and that kind of thing. But in 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, I was largely unemployed, which was a very harrowing time for me. But it also afforded me the opportunity to be able to just, get in the SUV and drive and not have any timeline to get to have to come back.
Wow.
So my career was information technology, and up until 2015, I was gainfully employed in that field while also running my organization. And in 2015 was when I pretty much walked away and decided that I was just going to focus all of my efforts and attention and energy on saving the animals.
Well, yeah, those were tough times. I was in college during 9/11, and it was very difficult, as so is the circumstances we're in today. And I just so appreciate your love for the animals and what you're doing. And I commend you on taking the time to devote your life to the animals through the Animal Rescue Front. And I was wondering what the aspects of working as the executive director for the Animal Rescue Front do you enjoy? What are the challenges today?
Oh gosh, the challenges are many. I don't even know where to begin. The challenges are many. Unfortunately, here we are almost 18 years later, and we're still dealing with a crisis, an animal welfare crisis in parts of our country. And there are a lot of reasons why that problem still exists. We're dealing with we work primarily in the state of Mississippi, and Mississippi is, if not the poorest state in the country, it's right behind Louisiana. The two of them kind of go hand in hand in national polls on that. And, so we're dealing with a very large state that's very poor, that's largely agricultural. They have a very small population. The population of Mississippi is about 3 million people. And where Massachusetts is probably a quarter the size of Mississippi, and we've got more than twice that. That's just Massachusetts.
Yep.
So we're dealing with some economical disparities. We're dealing with an agricultural state which views animals as property and not as, viable living things that deserve protection and care. And that's not a blanket statement. I would never make a blanket statement. There are many, many wonderful, wonderful people down there that are trying to affect change. And, almost 18 years later, we have seen some change, but not enough. We still have way too many animals down there that are in danger and that need to get out. One of the other things that And I would not have really believed this had I not witnessed it myself. But one of the other things that we deal with is religion. And I have heard on more than one occasion, if God hadn't meant for them to reproduce, he wouldn't have given them the ability to do so. So that's one argument against spaying and neutering. Another argument is ignorance. There's fear that it will damage the animal. And, after Katrina, I spent most of my time in Mississippi after initially spending the first couple of months largely in New Orleans. But back then so there were very few people, very, very, very few people on the Gulf Coast. The story of Katrina is actually a Mississippi story. It's not a New Orleans story. The media made it a New Orleans story. Had the levees not failed, New Orleans would not have drowned. And that in and of itself speaks to man-made disaster. The actual natural disaster occurred on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They were ravaged for miles along the coast and inland. There was nothing left standing. People's homes, businesses, there was nothing left standing. And the shelter that I spent most of my time trying to save, for lack of a better word, I remember one day a woman coming in with a laundry basket of puppies. And when we tried to explain to her that she really had to spay her dog, she said, "Oh, yes, yeah, we're going to do that eventually, but we wanted our children to witness the miracle of life."
Hmm.
And here we are with this litter, it was a lot of puppies that were thrust upon a shelter that had been condemned because of Katrina.
Wow.
And was not a safe place for animals to be in before Katrina, during Katrina, or after Katrina. So anyway, those are some of the challenges. And in terms of the more interpersonal challenges, doing this work is a heartbreaking endeavor. It is so difficult to continually be exposed to the ignorance and the cruelty of what human beings are capable of doing when it comes to animals, and to be witness to the vulnerability of animals who, through no fault of their own, are now, abandoned, hopeless. It can be very, very, very heartbreaking. Very, very, very heartbreaking. And another challenge is financial. So we're a small nonprofit. We have stayed small. There's a number of reasons why we've stayed small. The main one being we are committed to doing this with the utmost integrity and transparency and care for the animals. And in order for us to achieve that, we have to set our sights somewhat low. We know we can't save every animal, but as our motto states, until there are none, save one. And we just keep saving one, and then one, and then one.
Wow, yeah. It's so timely that I had just unexpectedly fostered a puppy from Oklahoma, and someone in my town let the mothers in town know through Facebook that there were puppies who needed to be rescued and needed to be fostered that were coming up on transport to Massachusetts. And some of us got to talking, and we didn't realize that some of the capacity of some of these shelters and down there, and how they have to euthanize puppies. And I was ignorant to knowing the laws in different states and what's culturally accepted in different states as well. And actually, I'm getting texts on my phone from the volunteer up here who wanted to check in and see how I was doing after our foster situation. And I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to have this experience before I talked to you, because it was a very enjoyable experience for us, where my young family got to enjoy the love of a little puppy for a couple weeks, and educate ourselves about the problem. And I was able to find a puppy a home. So it was very rewarding for my family to be involved in that way. And it was not only rewarding, but also enjoyable and educational. And I'm just so thankful that there are folks like you who are doing this important work.
Well, and you know what, Jen, honestly, without folks like you, we would fail. We need people like you who are willing to take an animal into their home on a short-term basis to, give them time to find the home that they belong to. It's so important that folks foster, that folks adopt and don't buy animals from breeders. If there's anything that I would want people to really walk away from here, is that there are so many wonderful, wonderful, deserving, precious animals all over our country that are in shelters and in rescues that need homes. And I would hope that people would think twice before going to a breeder, before going to a puppy mill online. When you're purchasing a puppy online, it is a very, very risky endeavor, because there are puppy mills throughout the United States, sanctioned and not by their states, that are just producing purebred puppies on a scale that is just repugnant. And the conditions that the mothers particularly are kept in are deplorable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the type of activity that we simply cannot afford as a compassionate, humane society. We can't afford to support that money-making, that money-making business. We just can't. So please go to your local shelter. Please go to adoption websites such as petfinder.com and adoptapet.com. Find your next family member there.
Yeah.
And if you're really, really stuck on purebred, there are pure breed rescues for just about every breed in just about every state.
Yeah.
And there are purebred animals in shelters across the United States.
Yep.
I read not too long ago, in the last couple of years, that something like 25.7% of animals in shelters are pure breed dogs.
Wow.
So there's absolutely, this is going to sound a little maybe strong, but there's no reason to go to a breeder. There's absolutely no good reason to go to a breeder.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a stigma. I heard the puppy we were fostering, it was a black dog, and I learned about black dog syndrome. And that is that people, for whatever reason, don't want to adopt the black dog.
Yeah, that's really prevalent down south. Black cats, of course, have been saddled with that whole. I mean, even I grew up with it. Black cats, Halloween. They're spooky, they're scary, or whatever. But yes, there is a black dog, black cat stigma still attached, particularly in the South.
It's so sad, and I'm so glad you're sharing with our listeners more about what's happening so that they can be aware, and the solution that they can be a part of, which, as you mentioned, is adopting and not shopping. Because sometimes we don't even realize that we're part of the problem if we're looking into buying a puppy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious, we talked about your advice about how people can be part of the solution today, which is not just adopting, but also fostering, and the wonderful experience that can be. But going back to the experience you had early on back in 2005, I'm curious if you could share to folks who sometimes think about starting a nonprofit or want to make a difference in a larger way. I'm wondering what your advice would be about how they can get started with working with a nonprofit.
In terms of in general, or with an animal focused goal?
Either, maybe both.
Well, there are so many opportunities for people to get involved with animal welfare in the North. Well, really anywhere in the country. Starting your own nonprofit it can be challenging. Some of the things that one has to think about is, finances, raising the money, getting one's 501c3, which is the federal designation for a federally recognized nonprofit in the United States. That's going to set people back some amount of money. A law firm will have to be hired, or a lawyer will have to be hired. There's a lot of state regulations that have to be followed. There's, you're going to, at some point, maybe not at the very beginning, but you're going to have a good accountant. You're going to have a board of directors. You're going to have to come up with bylaws. Those are the laws that the organization has agreed to abide by from an operational perspective. So there's a lot to think about. It's not just, we're going to start rescuing dogs. If people, say in Massachusetts, where you and I both live, obviously, if they want to start a rescue, some of the things that they have to think about are, how are we going to get the animals? How are we going to develop relationships with shelters in other parts of the country that need our help? And as with any endeavor, you have to be really, really careful with who you partner with. I had the good fortune that when I found myself down in Mississippi and Louisiana, I met so many people and I had relationships with so many shelters that we just kind of evolved naturally over time to where we are today. And with the 6 groups that we work with down in Mississippi, still to this day. But if you haven't had that kickstart, so to speak, it can be really hard. It's not like there's a website that you can go to and find out that, this county in Georgia needs help getting their animals out. I mean, you have to think about state regulations in Georgia and Massachusetts. You have to think about transportation regulations. You have to think about a transportation vehicle. So what I would really recommend to people is, if your heart is with wanting to work with animals, any local shelter is going to be a nonprofit. Any local shelter that you work with. You can find out if they need help starting a foster program. The shelters up here need people to work in them. There's been an employment challenge since the pandemic, and our shelters have really experienced that. So you can look and see what rescues already exist in your area. You can get on the board of one. You can volunteer with one. You can take a job at a shelter. There's a lot of things that you can do to get yourself exposed and get yourself some experience before you start thinking about starting your own nonprofit. Because ultimately, we want anyone who's starting out to do something with such goodness. We want them to be successful. So my best advice is get involved locally with a shelter or a rescue, and find out what the inner operations are like, and get some experience.
That's great advice. And for your nonprofit, I'm curious what the vision you have is for what you're able to do if money were not an option, because I know that's the biggest challenges, especially for a small nonprofit. What would be your vision for Animal Rescue Front?
My hope is that Animal Rescue Front will outlive me, and that it will be there for as long as my friends in Mississippi, who have been fighting this fight in their local communities for as long as they need us. That really is my hope. We've got a strong board of directors. We have a couple of benefactors that have been solely responsible for keeping us afloat since 2010. And my sincerest hope is that the organization will outlive me and be here as long as Mississippi needs us. I have a property out in Western Massachusetts with 12 acres that I am leaving in my will to my organization. And my long-term vision would be that would eventually become a sanctuary for the animals to get out of Mississippi and potentially Louisiana. We've worked with Louisiana off and on since Katrina, and be up here and safe while they're waiting for their homes.
I love the legacy vision you have for your organization. And I love that you have a bigger vision. And I'm curious if you could have a vision for what could change in our country for taking care of and humanely of the animals. What do you see could happen if we all played a role in making the situation better for animals in our country?
We have federal laws now that protect animals from, well, they don't necessarily protect animals, but what they do is they incarcerate offenders for those that would injure, maim, or kill an animal. We have federal laws. State laws are still lacking in places like Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, really along the deep, in the deep South, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Arkansas. If puppy mills were banned on a federal level, I think that would go a long way to making our country a kinder, more compassionate place. And, when I think about where our focus is as a society, where our tax dollars go, and, I've been accused of wearing rose-colored glasses and being very idealistic. And it's something that I was born with, and I'm still that person almost 64 years later. I'm still that person.
I'm with you.
We are so screwed up in what our priorities are. We don't take care of our teachers. We don't take care of our children. We don't take care of our animals, our first responders. But we throw billions into defense. We don't tax billionaires. There's so many we have so much money that we could really right this ship. Mm-hmm. We could invest in our kids. We could invest in our teachers. And we could but again, here I am being, idealistic Chris. And, but that's where I would start. That's where I would start instead of, and sometimes I think we just have to really look in our own backyards.
Yep.
We have to just really look at what's in front of us, and we have to take care of that. If we could just wrap our arms around what is going on in our communities and treating people better. I mean, it's appalling that teachers don't make a living wage.
Yeah.
It's appalling.
Yeah. Mental
health workers, we have so little mental health support in this country. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. And it reminds me that, my passion is for involvement with nonprofits, and that's the focus of this podcast. But it's such a good reminder about getting involved with making change in our laws. And I love how you mention making change in our own backyards. And I love your passion for nonprofits, for change, and how compassionate. And I won't fault you for being, because I am too. And I think that is reflected in my whole messaging around my podcast. It's plain to see that I have a hope and vision for making the world a better place, and all of us getting involved in some capacity. One of my biggest concerns is that just 25% of Americans volunteer every year. And we could get so much more done if we were all volunteering. And there's so many Americans who give back financially to nonprofits, but I feel like it's so rewarding when we spend our time, when we spend our passion in the nonprofit world, that's really revolutionary, not just for the recipients, but for ourselves as well. I'm so happy we talked today, and I'm curious if you have anything else you'd like to mention that we didn't already talk about to our listeners.
So I'm going to do a plug for my book. And the reason, so there's the main reason for that is it tells a story that is unique in all of United States history. That people, just ordinary people, not extraordinary people, not celebrities, not rich people, just ordinary people got up and walked away from their lives. They were from Canada. They were from the United States. I met a vet tech from Mexico. Literally dropped everything, walked away from their lives, having no clue what they were walking into, because they cared. They cared about an animal that they hadn't even met yet.
Yeah.
They weren't prepared. How could we possibly be prepared? Nothing like this had ever happened before.
Yeah.
We showed up and we figured it out. And as a result of that, there's a nationwide transport program in existence today that we started back in 2005. Just ordinary people figuring it out, thinking about something much bigger than themselves. And the people that I met, who I'm still friends with today, we are like a family. And they are the most remarkable human beings I have ever been blessed to know. And I want the world to know about them. I want the world to know that you don't have to be wicked smart. You don't have to have a lot of money. You know, you don't have to be physically strong. You don't need to be educated with college degrees. You just need to have a big heart. And you just need to care about something that's bigger than yourself. And if you have that, follow that passion, and you can make a difference in this world. And that's really, you know, so many people have said to me, oh my God, this book is so inspirational. It's so inspirational. And that's what we need. We need to inspire one another. You know, we need to know that just because we're another bozo on the bus doesn't mean that we can't do something extraordinary. And I think ultimately people that read the book are going to walk away feeling empowered and inspired, and might even find their life's calling, which is ultimately what ended up happening with me.
Chris, that's beautiful. And I just love what you said. I can't wait to share it with my listeners and with the broader world. I want to make sure that my listeners can find Animal Rescue Front and find your book. So I'll make sure those are in the show notes, which are on my website. And if you want to just mention here what your website is for the Animal Rescue Front.
Yes, it's animalrescuefront.org.
Perfect. That's so easy. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Jen, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. You take care.
You too. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.